Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cooke, and this week we split the show into two distinct parts. You're going to hear in a few minutes' time about the Acting Collectively Seniors Research Project, which is taking place in Richmond County and two other parts of Cape Breton. But to kick things off, here is the first of two segments of an interview I recently conducted with the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and the education coordinator for Cape Breton Pride, Veronica Merryfield. June is Pride Month, and there are several activities scheduled to mark Pride Month across northeastern Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Island. However, the guest that you're about to meet has just come off a few weeks' worth of speaking engagements with someone who was part of a key moment in the history of Pride and the history of LGBTQIA rights. She is the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and the education coordinator for Cape Breton Pride. We are pleased to welcome back to Telile Community Television, Veronica Merryfield. Veronica, thank you for joining me once again.
Thank you for this opportunity.
As I mentioned, you've just come off a speaking tour around the Maritimes, and you were with one of the last survivors of the Stonewall Riots. And before we get into what that experience was like for you, I'd like you to give our audience a bit of a breakdown as to what exactly the Stonewall Riots were and why that's considered so important, even to the point that they're a big reason that June is Pride Month. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. The riots in Stonewall happened in 1969 on June 28th. It was a Friday night. At that time, being gay was illegal in the US. The Stonewall Inn was owned by the mafia as a money thing. They really didn't care where their money came from. And it was set up as a meeting place for the gay community in a section of Christopher Street in Greenwich Village, New York. This 5-block section was a safe zone for the community. It was somewhere where they could gather without having to look over their shoulders to see if they were going to be attacked for any reason. But even though the Stonewall Inn was somewhere they could congregate, it was always subject to raids by the police. And very often those raids were somewhat violent in that the police would break down the doors rather than just opening the doors. The members of the community would have to show ID, they'd have to be, they were subject to being taken away, those kind of things. But on the night of June 28th, the police raided as they had done before, but something was different this night, and I think it's probably because too many times they had been raided. And one of the police officers took away one of the members of the community and beat them and put them in the back of one of their paddy wagons, one of their vehicles that they would take prisoners away in. But as the policeman turned around and walked away, the person they had arrested fought back and kicked at the back of the police officer, and the police officer took it upon themselves to beat this person into unconsciousness. When they turned around to the crowd and told the crowd, you've seen what you came to see, now go away, the crowd didn't go away. They started moving in, and the police that were there sought refuge in the inn because it was then the only safe place they could go rather than having to suffer from what was going to become the riot. And the rioters outside didn't give it up on this time. They started throwing things, they set fire to the doors, and the police called in the riot squad. And the riot squad were there, they were set up to fight organised crime and sort of other violence that happened. And instead they were called to deal with these folks in the community. And it turned into a night of riots with the police chasing the community, but the community knew their area very well, so they were able to escape down alleyways and through buildings and that kind of stuff. And the police mounted a total of 3 raids on that crowd, but they weren't able to subdue them. So by Saturday morning, it had gone quiet. Everybody was exhausted. They'd gone home. But the area of Christopher Street had ended up with a lot of broken windows, the kind of things you'd expect after a riot. It was a burnout. Stonewall Inn then closed a few weeks later, and it didn't really reopen for some years. But one of the most poignant things was that the following year, to commemorate that, there was a march. They managed to get permission for a march, and they marched from Washington Park to Central Park. And initially they were only expecting to have a few people turn up, and the police weren't expecting there to be many people. But as it turned out, there were a lot, and it became a very large crowd that took a long time to get into Central Park. And that, in essence, was the first Pride Parade, although in 1970 it wasn't called Pride. The community weren't known as 2SLGBTQI. They were just the community. The Pride flag that we know today didn't occur until 1978, so it was the start of all that. And although nowadays we have a lot of commercialisation around Pride,
yes,
there's still the underlying thing that Pride is there as a form or a remembrance of a protest, and a protest that needed to take place to fight for the rights of freedom of then the gay community, but of the entirety of the 2SLGBT community. So today, when I think about what we do at Pride, it is partly about that remembrance of what we needed to do to fight for our rights. And the way things are going politically at the moment, that fight is becoming ever more important. It's a way for me to be seen at a Pride Parade. It's a way for me to recognise that the freedoms and rights that we have currently have been hard fought. They're a way for those who are looking for to their own identities to see that we are still out there and we're still there to be counted. And it's also a way for me to remember that there are many who have fought hard and lost their lives over the years that need to be memorialised at Pride. So Pride for me and Pride marches are a huge piece of this, of what we're doing. They're a huge piece to show that there is a community out there. And I'm always pleased to see how many people turn out to support the parade, both in terms of being in the parade and lining the streets to mark the parades.
Part of the reason that I am interested in having you here to speak specifically about the Stonewall Riots is because they were part of the North American Civil Rights Movement. But I've found, as a straight white male, that I didn't see Stonewall being represented in documentaries or films or television specials or any such thing that would look back at the 60s. You would hear about the racial civil rights movement, and you'd hear about anti-war protests, but it seems to me from the outside looking in that Stonewall really wasn't represented. Was that the case? When did you find out about Stonewall?
I didn't find out about Stonewall until quite a lot later. I mean, Stonewall happened when I was 3 years old, so I didn't know about it then, and plus I was in the UK then. It was quite some years before I came across Stonewall, and it was quite a long time before Pride parades became a bit more usual. And, the first Pride parade in Cape Breton was not until sort of 15, 20 years ago. I can't really remember. But I know even then it was a very difficult thing for the original pioneers to set up here. And they had difficulty getting a route, they had difficulty getting permissions, and it took a lot of effort for them to stand up and be seen. Now it's a little bit easier to do. But we still see that with the new parades that want to come in. We've had parades for the first time in Port Hawkesbury last year. Mm-hmm. We had them in Membertou the year before. I think it was the year before anyway, it might have been a bit earlier. There's Pride parades happening for the first time in Yarmouth this year. Mm-hmm. These are the kind of things that take time in communities to kind of get those permissions to do. And again, it's for people to stand up and show and be counted. It's the visibility and representation that's important. We're out here, we're being seen. I think to a large part, the events of Stonewall didn't appear in more broader coverage because there's this idea with colonial politics to subvert that kind of stuff. It doesn't fit with the narrative that a lot of people want. They don't want to see sexuality or gender outside of that binary. For them, it's male or female, and that binary extends into different things, good or bad, for instance. So that piece of it is challenging a lot of these undercurrents that exist in politics, and we're seeing that kind of erupt now. For all the want in the world, we can naively think that it's not going to happen in Canada because Canada is such a progressive place, but we know that's not true. The naivety of standing aside is just going to let the problems perpetuate. All you need for evil to persist is for good men to stand by and do nothing.
Yes.
But it's certainly that part of it. If people don't do anything, then these kind of atrocities will keep continuing in the same way that the atrocities that happened under colonialism with the residential school system were able to just keep perpetrating. If you decide that you're going to paint a certain section of peoples in bad light, I mean, in that case it was the savages, then you're going to get a lot of buy-in from all sorts of political people who aren't, and the populace in general, to not think about it, not look at it, just take it at their word. And the same thing happens with gender and sexuality. There's a lot of people that say, well, it's not biological, it's not scientific, it's kind of, but it is. It's just that you're not looking at the science and the biology. Or they will say this is a new thing, it's a fad, but it's not. There's evidence sort of 10,000 years ago with the Cree Nation, for instance, who have a number of words to describe what we now call transgender and gay, lesbian, bisexual people. Mm-hmm. In the same way it existed in the ancient Hebrew behind the biblical text that people want to stand by as their weapon of binaryism. In the ancient Hebrew, there's at least 8 different terms for genders that people just choose to ignore. And you have to, well, to me, you have to start asking, well, where did that come from? Why did that happen? What were people trying to do? What was the context? And what's happened over the last sort of 1400 years that people have wanted to do that? What is the purpose of that colonialism? What have they used that for? What have they weaponized to do that?
Now, you mentioned the idea that so many indigenous nations had specific words for different genders. And of course, we're seeing more frequently in recent years the rise of Two-Spirit within Mi'kmaq communities here in Nova Scotia. And they've been part of pride activities as well, too, and in the general education of many people here. What has that meant to you personally and to your fellow organizers within the Transgender Network and Cape Breton Pride? How has that impacted it?
I would argue that the Two-Spirit piece is not new. It's been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. But again, a lot of the pieces of those societies have been crushed over the years, certainly from the imperialism of the invasion in 1725 and the Lieutenant General perpetrating the idea that kids need to be taken away from their homes, they need to tame these savages, and to not allow the First Nation peoples to be who they are. So with that, all of the other pieces go as well. I mean, that two-spirited piece is in there. To me personally, that it shows that this is just part of humanity as a whole. Those two-spirit identifications have been there for thousands of years, and they were there without question. It was part of the culture, but that culture was tried to be stomped out and eradicated, and it was always there. So seeing all of the peoples stepping into, yes, this is, two-spirit, transgender sexualities have always been there, is an important part for everybody. In the same way that, I could go back to 3,500 years BC and look at it in sort of what was the source of Western cultures, or current Western cultures. But if you go back beyond the Council of Nicaea and the establishment of the church in England, these kind of things were there in the ancient English, and they weren't criticised in the way that they are now, which gets you to ask, well, actually, what did happen? Why did they want to do that? And that's become that Council of Nicaea, the monks, and the establishment of common law, and then the establishment of legislative assemblies is the underpinning of the legal system in Canada. So, when the colonials came to Canada, they brought all that with them.
And now, as promised, here is some information about the Acting Collectively Seniors Research Project. It's taking place in Richmond County, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, and Victoria County. It started last fall and will wrap up this coming fall, and it's being led by researchers from Dalhousie University with some local project coordinators in the different parts of Cape Breton. One of them is a familiar face from the Seniors Take Action Coalition. Her name is Celeste Gotell. Here is our interview explaining how the Acting Collectively process got underway based on its roots in the United Kingdom and how it's being carried out here in Richmond County right now. And now joining us to discuss the Acting Collectively project, we're pleased to welcome the local project coordinator. Celeste Gotell is her name. Thank you very much, Celeste, for joining me on Telile today.
Oh, I'm always happy to join Telile and share about some of the work that we're doing in Richmond County. So thanks for inviting me, Adam.
No problem at all. So let's begin with a bit of the background of Acting Collectively. Obviously, there have been other projects that have happened over the years to try to get the pulse of seniors locally and to get a sense of what their main issues are. What makes Acting Collectively different, and how did it come that Richmond County became involved in this as well?
Essentially, it's a research project, but it's an opportunity for a group of researchers that are based in Dal to look at a particular tool that is an international tool that is used all over the world. It's from the UK. It's actually called ACT, and that's the name of the tool. And the purpose of this tool is to kind of, as you indicated, is to kind of assess the social and health needs of seniors, and by doing so, connecting them with the resources in their communities. So they got permission from the ACT folks in the UK to actually pilot the tool in Nova Scotia to see whether or not there would be value in actually starting to look at this tool as a way of doing assessments for older adults to live well in place and age in place in their communities within Nova Scotia. So there were 3 communities in Cape Breton that were identified to participate, and these were initiatives that were requested by the municipalities. So in all 3 instances, in CBRM, Victoria, and Richmond, a request went out to municipalities, and they expressed an interest. And because we have some really knowledgeable and well-connected folks in Richmond County around older adults issues, people like Dr. Dorothy Bernard, it came as no surprise that Richmond County was selected to actually be one of the pilot sites. So I've been involved with working with seniors in the community for the last number of years, and I was brought into the project to kind of take on the responsibility of that local kind of project oversight.
So for those that are watching now and not sure what this project is all about and how it is carried out, can you give us a bit of a breakdown on what happens if someone decides, well, I'd like to share my story? First of all, how can they get in touch with you, and what happens when they do get in touch with Acting Collectively?
Yeah, so essentially, it's a research project, but really it's an opportunity for older adults in Richmond County and in the other 2 counties that are 65 and over to help inform some really important work that's underway. So not only will the individual, if they choose to participate in the interview, be brought through a series of questions, which will then connect them with their own personal plan, which they'll receive afterwards, that will connect them with the kinds of resources that would be helpful to address the needs that they identified in the interview. But what they're also helping to inform is some of the gaps in services. So this will be useful for the municipality going forward to start to identify what are the areas of concern that have been identified through this project, and where do we have some gaps in services, and are there opportunities to grow those services and to work with other levels of government to address it. So it's really important that it's not just about them getting their action plan, but they're helping to inform potential improvements to services into the future. So if somebody wanted to get involved, all they have to do is to reach out to the Dr. Kingston Community Health Center, who's kind of overseeing the project on behalf of the municipality. Let her know that they've heard about the project and they'd like to register to participate. It's that simple. She will ask a few questions to make sure that they meet the criteria. And then what happens after that is we have some folks in the local community. Many people may know these individuals because, again, these are people that are known to the community to support older adults, and they're known as assessors. So they're folks that actually will conduct the interview. So it's a confidential interview. It can be done on the phone or in person. People do not need to be concerned that they'll be identified in any way. There's all kinds of provisions for confidentiality because it is a research project. The person that's doing the interview would never disclose any of this information. I don't even know who's being interviewed, and I'm the project coordinator. So it's all very, very confidential. And they will walk the person through the interview, ask the questions, and it's that simple. It would be really great if we heard from a lot more people because we have a long ways to go before we meet our quota.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, Celeste, because I understand that the project is going to wrap up this fall, early this fall, and you folks are looking for a certain number of people to interview within Richmond County. How has that been going so far, and how many more do you need to be able to wrap things up?
Well, we'd like to wrap it up this fall because we kind of want to get on to different things. Although the project itself could carry on a bit longer. I think the window to complete the project from the research team goes into 2024. Ideally, we would like to kind of get things wrapped up in the fall because we actually kicked this project off in the fall. So in my mind, I had like a 1-year window to try to do that recruiting. There has been a lot of promotions around this project. I'm sure people have heard about it. It's been in every copy of Richmond Reflections. There was a postcard that went out to every home. It's been promoted widely through social media as well as through the local media and including Telile. So I think people have heard about this project, but so far we've not had enough people pick up the phone to say they want to get involved. So this is my challenge to folks in Richmond County. To older adults, please get involved because this is important to our future. It's important to identify what is needed moving forward as we have an aging population. We're at the halfway mark. So when we got involved with this project, I think the ideal was to have 150 people recruited. When we got involved, we said we would aim for 120, keeping in mind that the population of Richmond County is less than 9,000 people. So, it's not like CBRM where there's a significant population to draw from. So we committed to 120. And as of today, we have 59 interviews completed. So we reached that 50% mark. We have another 8 or 9 people that have expressed an interest. Okay. We do have an event that's going on next week in Louisville called Imagine the Possibilities, where we've invited representatives from seniors clubs throughout Richmond County to attend. There will be a presentation by the Acting Collectively team at that event. We're hoping that we'll recruit a couple more people at that event, and also that the seniors clubs will take this information back and spread the word. I've also because I'm committed to try to get this done by the fall, recognizing that we're going into summer and a lot of seniors clubs don't meet. In September, I'd like to kind of reach out and actually do presentations at the seniors clubs on this project. And we have, a small little honorarium that we could provide seniors clubs if they want to partake and host a presentation of $100 to a club if they want to get involved. So yeah, so we're hoping by the end of October to have reached our 120 mark.
So there are a lot of incentives for people to take part. The biggest one being that by sharing their experiences, they could be impacting policy that's developed in terms of recognizing the needs of seniors for not just years, but decades to come. But that being said, I'm wondering if you'd like to debunk a couple of myths about the Acting Collectively project. Part of the reason that we have you here is because on the very same show that this interview is airing, we're going to have a mock version of an interview being done for Acting Collectively, filmed in our Telile studios with Michele MacPhee and Debbie Samson. But I also wanted to give you the chance to say, what are you hearing that you might want to dispel in terms of half-truths or rumors or myths or anything? Basically, what are you hearing that you've had to say to people, no, that's not the way this works?
Yeah, so yeah, as you mentioned, two of our assessors, Michele and Debbie, have graciously offered to do a bit of a mock interview so that people could see the kinds of questions that are being asked, so that they recognize that they're not that personal. And one of the people can choose to pass on a question. If they're not feeling comfortable with it, they can choose to pass on it. So that's something that I think is important to note. I think the other thing that's important to note is I know that a lot of emphasis in recent years has been placed about older adults not providing information about themselves because of the risks involved, because of scams and identity theft and things like that. And again, because this is a research project, all those kinds of precautions have been put in place to protect the identity of the participants. And all the assessors have signed confidentiality agreements. As I mentioned earlier, I don't even know who's being interviewed. So this is all very confidential, and I think people can take great comfort in knowing that. It's only about an hour of a person's time, so it's not an onerous process. It's not what it's called a research project, but really it's just a conversation with one of our local assessors who are very familiar with working with older adults. They've done this as part of their profession, and it's just to find out what are your needs, how we can help you with your needs, what resources are out there to support you, and again, help inform changes that may be needed as we move forward.
So as we wind down our conversation here, Celeste, and as you head into the last 4 months of gathering material for Acting Collectively, are you optimistic that you'll be able to get the numbers that you need as we head towards October? You mentioned there were 8 or 9 people that have expressed an interest to you just recently, and you have the event coming up in Louisdale to try to drum up more interest. But do you feel that people will continue to come forward as we head through the late stages of spring, the summer, and into the fall?
Well, I certainly hope so, Adam. I mean, I think, the fact that we've reached 60 to me is a good sign. And again, I know there's a lot of people out there wondering, like, why would I participate? So there's all kinds of reasons to participate, as we've explained. But the other thing is I wanted to mention, it's really important that we get a cross section from right across Richmond County. So, and it's also important that we get a wide range of ages from 65 and up and a wide range of health needs and issues. So if you have a parent who is in their 80s or 90s that may not likely participate on their own, there's no reason why you cannot sit with your parent and support them through that process. If you have somebody that has a hearing impairment in your life, a family member or a friend, you can join them for the interview and be a support to them. So there's no reason whatsoever that anybody should not be able to participate in this project. There should be no barriers. As I said, we can do it by phone or we can do it in person if that's what's necessary. We also have the ability to do it in French. So I'm hopeful. I know that having worked in this community for the last number of years and having been from there, that older adults are people who care about their community. And this is one way of being able to show how much you care is by getting involved and participate in this important project.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short time, as I expected we might. Celeste, did you have anything else you wanted to add about acting collectively just before we wrap up?
The other thing I want to add is again, we're using this tool with the permission of the ACT project in the UK. So this is it is owned by them, and we have the permission to use this tool. So I just wanted to kind of restate that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that next week at the Imagine the Possibilities event, we do have some of the researchers that are going to be there, and we also have one of the team who are willing to do registrations right there. So if there are people that are really interested in this project, there's an opportunity for them to drop into the Loosedale Hall at about 1 o'clock to hear a presentation directly from the team and get registered right on the spot. They wouldn't do the interview on the spot; they just get registered. So even though they may not be attending that event, if they are interested, and there is a senior involved with one of the clubs throughout Richmond County that would like to attend that event, again, I invite them to connect with me and ask me about this event, because we still have the opportunity to invite a few more folks.
We appreciate hearing about acting collectively, the progress of the project, and where it's going from here. And we know your time is very limited with the amount of work you're putting in here, Celeste, you and your fellow assessors. So thank you so much for giving me a couple of minutes to explain it here on Telile Community Television today.
And thank you for inviting us into the conversation.
Now, you might be wondering, how does the interview process go for the Acting Collectively Research Project? To help answer that question and paint a picture for you right here on our Telile airwaves, we've invited two of the assessors that are involved in asking questions of local seniors. One of them is a member of the Seniors Take Action Coalition, Debbie Samson. She is being interviewed in the next segment by Michele MacPhee, who is the Senior Safety Coordinator for Richmond County. Now, we have to point out that this interview is entirely fictional. However, it is based on questions that are involved in the Acting Collectively process and that have been set up by the originators of Acting Collectively in the United Kingdom. So, here is the mock interview that was carried out in our Telile studios to give you an example of what happens when somebody takes part in the Acting Collectively research project here in Cape Breton Island.
We only have 2 domains left. This domain is all about mental health.
Okay.
11 questions here. So wondering if you have any concerns about memory loss or forgetfulness.
No, not really. Sometimes I forget what I went in the other room for, but I think that's normal. I've done that all my life, so I don't know. I think I'm okay, memory-wise.
Okay, that's fair. I will say no then. All right, so Debbie, I'm going to ask you to remember these 3 words: necklace, table, computer.
Necklace, table, computer.
Okay. All right. And Debbie, do you know the full date today?
I believe it's May. Is it the 30th or the 20th? It's the 30th, I think, 2023.
You're right on the money,
Okay.
Debbie. Great. Yes, thank you. And where are we located right now?
Well, we're in 20 Freddy's Lane, I believe.
Okay. Yes, that is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, do you ever feel lonely? And you could say no, never, yes, sometimes, yes, often, or skip the question.
I would say no. No, I'm good.
Okay. And are you participating in a lot of social activities? Is that
Yes,
part of...
and I have a lot of family around me.
Yeah.
Like 2 of my children live next on either side of me, and I have a lot of grandchildren, and so I have lots of social interactions. And I go out. I go to the seniors events, and yes, I'm okay. So it's good. I'm good.
Perfect. Have you ever gone to the We Care Days in Lewisdale?
Of course.
They're fabulous.
Yes.
Okay. Have you suffered from any recent loss or bereavement?
No, it's been a while, yeah.
Okay, I know you had mentioned at the beginning that you were widowed, and
it's 10 years now, so yeah, you get, it's hard at first, but you get used to living on your own, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I see. And how about your sleeping? Any issues with sleeping in the past few months?
No, not usually, but if something comes up, like if one of the kids, have something going on that's, that I worry about, sometimes I will, but no, for the most part, I sleep well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. How about bodily pain? Have you had any bodily pain in the past month? And we give you a bit of a scale here to say no bodily pain at all, yes, very mild, mild, moderate, severe, or skip.
I would say mild.
Mild?
Yeah,
Yep.
arthritic pain once in a while,
Okay.
When you get up to your 90s, you start to creak a little bit, so
Sure.
yeah.
And is this something you discuss with your family doctor, your arthritis that's being monitored?
Yeah, we've talked about it, but a Tylenol once in a while never hurt me at all.
Okay.
So I take that and it goes away.
Oh,
so,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sounds like you're managing well. Okay. And during the last month, have you been bothered by feeling down, maybe depressed, or even hopeless?
No.
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 Okay, good to hear. And during the last month, Debbie, have you been bothered by having little interest or pleasure in doing things, maybe even things that you did normally?
Oh, no. No, I do everything that I want to do.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Debbie, I'm going to ask you to recall the 3 words that we mentioned.
Necklace, table, computer.
Great job. Yes,
Oh,
that
good.
is correct.
Good.
Good work.
Oh, well, I guess I don't have anything to worry about.
That's great. So domain 5 has been completed. We're moving on to the final domain, 6 of 6. And we have 12 questions here, and this is all about staying healthy. Okay. Are you able to pursue your leisure interests, your hobbies, maybe work or learning activities that are important and meaningful to you?
Yes, I used to read a lot more than I do because of the sight. I have a little bit more trouble with that. And I used to play cards a lot, but my children have been very inventive. They found this card game for me. It's called Skiboo, and the numbers are really big on the cards.
Okay.
So I can play. They come and they play with me, so I get my card playing fix. But yeah, I think I do enough. To keep me busy and happy. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that you're troubleshooting accordingly. And I did think about when you mentioned the reading, maybe audiobooks through the library.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's something that you might be interested in exploring. I know you said that you're managing all right, but if you wanted to add anything else, we could include it in the comment box.
All right, good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. And do you exercise regularly?
Well, I do these few. I used to do a lot more, but I still do a few yoga exercises in the morning. It gets me started in the morning, so I try to do that. And then I like to walk, not much more than 15 minutes. It's all, mostly what I can do now, but 3 or 4 times a week I'll do that if the weather permits,
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you practice yoga on your own, or do you take a class with an instructor? Or?
No, it's all from what I've learned from instructors over the years.
Great.
I don't go out to classes anymore. It's too difficult, but.
Okay, great work, Debbie. Debbie, do you smoke tobacco, cigarettes, cigars, pipe, maybe cannabis?
No.
Okay. And do you think you drink too much alcohol?
No.
No. And Debbie, have you had your blood pressure checked recently?
Yes, well, I have a machine.
I see.
And I check it periodically. I don't have any problems with my blood pressure. I'm not on any medication for that. But once in a while, if I think I feel dizzy or something, I'll take it. But yeah, I keep an eye on it.
It's being monitored.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have any concerns about your diet or general nutrition?
No.
No.
I eat well.
Okay. How about concerns surrounding a loss of appetite? I know you just said you eat well, but...
No, I mean, as you age, you're not as hungry, I don't think, because, but I eat smaller meals more often.
Okay.
Okay, but, and that fulfills my needs, I think.
Okay, perfect. It works for you. It's
working.
Okay. How about your weight? Do you have any concerns there? Could be being overweight, weight loss, no concerns?
Well, you know what women are like. We're all worried about being too overweight, but no, I think I'm fine. I'm happy with my weight. My clothes fit, as long as my clothes fit.
That's great. Okay. So I'm just capturing no concerns.
Okay.
And I'm wondering whether you have any concerns about the condition of your skin. And that could be, aesthetically or something more like a mole or...
Oh, no, no, I'm okay. I'm good.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you get older, are you concerned about your appearance?
Well, I always like to look good, So when I go out, I put on some lipstick.
Wonderful.
Still, I like to look good. But no, I'm not worried about it, no.
Okay, that's great. Looking great today as well. Love all your outfit. So Debbie, wondering whether you think you're up to date with your vaccinations.
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful. And in general, would you say your health is excellent, very good, good, fair, poor, or prefer to skip the question?
I think it's very good for my age.
Wonderful, that's great. Oh, there you go. Concluding domain number 6. Fabulous, Debbie. Thank you so much. So those are all the questions. So now what happens is there's a summary that comes up and it summarizes all of the things that you've chatted or maybe identified as an area of concern.
Okay.
And if you like, you can mark it as a priority and then we can look into the database and see what resources might be available to you. Does that sound okay?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, so scrolling right along, you did mention challenges with seeing with your glasses because of the glaucoma. Is this a priority concern for you? Would you like to learn more about resources?
Maybe, right now I'm functioning.
Yeah.
But what about if it gets worse? Maybe I should have those resources on hand in case, I know glaucoma has got a tendency to get worse. So yeah, maybe it would be a good idea. So you could mark that one.
Okay, great. I'll flag that one. And the next one that's flagging or coming up as an area that you identified possibly is issues with bladder. You said that you do use a pad, but that you do have occasional accidents. Would you like to explore?
I'm just wondering, I heard all kinds of things about these Kegel exercises, and I'm just wondering if there's somebody that teaches those or something.
Great question.
Is it too late for me? Am I too old? Or, stuff like that, right?
Excellent question.
Would it help?
I think that in our database, we do have a pelvic floor physiotherapist that is mentioned. So if you, with your permission, I'll mark this as a priority and we can explore the resources.
All right, good.
Yeah, and never too old to start anything like that, I don't think, right? And those were really the only two that were flagged. Actually, when we talked about whether or not you can go shopping, you had said that you do need a drive. Is this a challenge for you?
No, it's not a challenge. No, it's fine.
Okay. So moving right along, now we'll go into the resource database. And what's coming up for the glaucoma is the Community Service CNIB, Community Services for the Blind. I believe they have 2 offices. I'm just going to click on that resource and see what description comes up. So yes, it's talking about being located in Sydney, and there is a website you can visit. There's information describing what they offer here. Is that something you might like to learn more about?
I would, and you'll give me all that, will you?
Thank you for asking, yes. So what will happen is this will be sent off to the Dalhousie research team, and they're going to print off and send to you via mail, just in the mail. I think that's what you indicated for your preference. Yeah. It can also be sent via email if that's your choice.
No, but mail is good.
Mail, okay, perfect. So we'll flag that one, and then let's see what else is popping up. Do you have an optometrist that you're seeing already?
Oh, yes.
You do? Okay. So we have some optometrists that are popping up, but I think in terms of this list, that's the one that might be most relevant for you.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the second resource was about issues with bladder, and you had talked about you were interested in learning more about Kegel exercises. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So a few things are popping up here. We do have the pelvic floor physiotherapist. There's one in Sydney we see that's mentioned here. And they would be people that could teach you how to do the Kegel exercises, actually. Good. Yeah, so they would do an assessment, from what I understand, get more of a history about how long the issue's been ongoing, teach you appropriate exercises to modify and remedy.
Very good.
Yeah, so that contact information will be sent in this resource package that will be mailed to you.
Okay.
And we also have occupational therapy that's coming up as a possible resource through Nova Scotia Health, someone that would be able to visit your home and perhaps make some modifications or adaptations that might be helpful.
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think the most relevant one has already been flagged.
Okay.
So we'll move forward from there. Okay, and so at the end of the interview, we have an opportunity to add any additional comments as needed, but I think that the two areas that you've identified you've found a link to a resource in the database?
Good, yep.
Okay. I will just add the date today. And 0530. Okay, Debbie, so that actually concludes today's assessment. Thank you so much for participating.
Oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Oh, that's great. Well, if by chance you're interested in, we're still in recruitment mode, so we're looking for more participants. And if there's anyone else that you think might benefit from this, please feel free to tell your friends.
Great. I will try to do that for you.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Great to have you.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, take care, Debbie.
You too.
See you.
And we wrap up this week's edition of Telile 24/7 with the second half of my interview with Veronica Merryfield. She is the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and the education coordinator for Cape Breton Pride. And this time around, she's talking about her recent speaking tour around Atlantic Canada with a participant in the legendary Stonewall Riots that took place in 1969 and precipitated the modern Pride movement.
Martin Boyce has been doing speaking gigs for a while now. I think there's 4 people left from Stonewall Riots. He was 21 at the time in 1969. He's the last one that's able to physically do a speaking tour. He did a speaking tour in conjunction with the International Day of Pink for a 5-week tour across Canada. And he was in BC and Yukon, Yellowknife, Alberta, Ontario, before he came to the Atlantic provinces. The International Day of Pink is an organisation that I'm already on the Speakers Bureau with, and they reached out to the speakers in Atlantic Canada and asked if anybody would like to volunteer to be with Martin Boyce while he did the tours in Atlantic Canada to help facilitate those conversations and speaking gigs. So I saw that email, and within minutes I'd volunteered and I was picked for it. And for me, it was an opportunity to meet somebody who was at Stonewall. The chances of that happening are very, very remote.
True.
And for an opportunity like that to fall in my lap was, for me, was a huge deal. It was it was an opportunity not only to hear Martin Boyce talk about that, but it was an opportunity to spend time with him and talk about some of those things outside of Stonewall, to talk about some of the things that he's experienced in those intervening 53 years, and also to talk to him about some of the other work that he's done in the past. So there was a documentary done for Stonewall at the 50-year anniversary, and at that point there was still a policeman that was around who talked about how it was the law and they had to do what they were told to do. So it wasn't necessarily something they wanted to do, but it was something they were told to do, and probably under the penalty of losing their jobs. And that in itself is both interesting and chronically sad, that those are the kind of things that those that are called to protect and serve are being called to protect something that's illegal, that shouldn't be. It was really good to spend time with Martin Boyce and get that kind of connection, talk about the philosophies of LGBT rights, to talk about the issues that we've got coming up that he's not going to be able to fight for, but to see him inspire and his story inspire the younger generation to realise that the freedoms that we have to fight for. And any freedoms that we're given really aren't freedoms, particularly under the way colonialism is set up. And to see people responding to that, to realising that whether we like it or not, we're going to have to fight it, because our freedoms are at stake. Our very ability to be who we are is at stake.
You mentioned the response that you and Martin got. What kind of personal encounters were there? Did anybody in the audiences or students come up and speak to either of you afterwards? What was that like?
Lots of people came up and spoke to both of us. And that was heartfelt. I had my own set of people who would come up and talk to me, but I also got to watch those interactions with those people, and Martin, and some of those were very emotional because they understand the implication of the part that Martin played in gaining the rights that we do have today. But it's yielded a number of things for me. I've made a whole pile of new connections, and I'm getting new speaking engagements way outside of Cape Breton. This week I'm going down to Halifax to talk to a GSA. Later in the year I'll be going down to Yarmouth to participate in their Pride. And I'm going to be called back to some of the schools in PEI to talk to them too. So there's a lot of work still to be done. And it's interesting, we kind of did about a 60-40 school events and public events. And seeing the way that some of the issues are being handled in schools of late, it's interesting to see the difference between schools that are very supportive to their LGBTQ community, and the ways that I'm also seeing articles and issues coming out of schools that aren't supportive, and the pushback. And those kind of pushbacks talk about, we don't have protocols for that, but the underlying piece from education, Ministry of Education, is that to us LGBTQ people are supported, and I see that some schools do this sort of thing really, really well. So Citadel School I saw do it really well. Glace Bay High does it really well. Riverview is doing it really well, yet there are other schools that are doing it appallingly. And one of the key issues that I'm seeing now is about the reporting. So children that want to come out and use different pronouns and names at school, there's pieces of legislation that are pushing schools to report that back to parents. If a child isn't feeling safe at home, they're not going to come out at home, and they're going to come out at a school where they feel safe. They're able to be themselves for at least part of the time. If schools stop supporting that, those children are going to go back into the closet, and like I said before, that results in an increased suicide rate by 8 times. That's a very dangerous thing for the children and youth.
So as we wind down our conversation today and look at all of these issues, can you tell me what your personal experience was like being with Martin Boyce at this time in history, and what you might have learned from him and taken away from him through the speaking tour? Obviously, as you say, he's been across Canada, but what did it mean for you, who volunteered to be with him and wanted to be with him on this tour, to be able to spend some time with someone who was really a pioneer in LGBTQIA rights?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's a connection to history. It's a connection that I wouldn't necessarily have got any other way. Whilst I'm acutely aware of what Stonewall meant and what it did for the community, actually being able to talk to somebody who was there and connect those pieces of history, to get that the stories that you don't hear from sort of the bigger pieces of media, to get that personal story of what happened, but also to understand that, you know, the fight that needed to happen then, that wasn't called for but ended up happening, is a fight that we're here 50 years later. We're not calling for this, but we're going to have to do it, and we really don't have much choice. We're going to have to step into it. And whilst I've been active in campaigning and an advocate for so many decades now, and had to face the backlash of doing that, including getting anonymous death threats, we are, as a broader community, going to have to stand into that. And I'm really hoping that general viewers realise that just standing by on the sidelines because it doesn't affect them is not an answer. Post-Second World War, there was a minister in Germany by the name of Martin Niemöller, who had been a supporter of the Nazi Party earlier on, but then ended up being arrested because he stood against and opposed what they were doing. And he wrote a poem, or it's accredited to a poem, but I don't think it was a poem when he wrote it. And it says, first they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't speak up. Then they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't speak up. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't speak up. Then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't speak out. Then they came for me, and there was nobody to speak for me. And these are the kind of things that we're going to see when the US overturned Roe v. Wade. A lot of us knew that this was going to be the start of a punishing journey in having rights overturned. And already within a year, those rights are really being punished. That one piece of Roe v. Wade has led to the erosion, or the attempted erosion, of gay marriage rights, and now we're looking at transgender rights being, and 555 across 50 states. That's a lot of legislation. And when I checked, there was no state that didn't have something last night.
A long road yet to be traveled, but we have covered a lot of ground in just a short time here in our conversation, as I thought we might, and I appreciate that very much, Veronica. Sure. Did you want to add anything else about all of this just before we wrap up?
If there's a pride parade in your area, support it. We've got a lot coming up in the next few months. We've certainly got the Pride Parade in Sydney happening. We've got the flag raising on August the 4th and the parade on August the 5th. I know there's going to be other Pride activities around the province. Turn up, be seen, be counted.
Well, we appreciate you bringing these issues to light, as always, and we wish you happy Pride, but also a meaningful Pride as well as we get ready for June. So thank you, Veronica Merryfield, for joining me here on Telile Community Television today.
Thank you very much, Adam and Telile, for hosting me today.
And there you have it. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thank you to my interview guests this week, Veronica Merryfield and Celeste Gotell. And a big thank you to Acting Collectively assessors Debbie Samson and Michele MacPhee for staging the mock interview for Acting Collectively in our Telile studios. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour, or just some ideas for future editions of Telile 24/7, feel free to contact me directly or to contact Telile Community Television in Arishat. And be sure to follow Telile on social media. For now, I'm Adam Cooke. Thank you once again for joining me for Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.